Blog Talk Radio.
Once in a lifetime does a great author set the stage for a wonderful trip into the minds and lives of their characters. Yvonne Mason doesn't just write books, she crafts memorable experiences. Best-selling true crime fiction author Yvonne Mason will leave you on the edge of your seat and checking behind every corner for the weirdos that only real life can breed. Find her books on Amazon.com and make sure you check out such titles like Dreamcatcher, Failure Was Never an Option, The Pink Canary, and Silent Scream today.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Off the Chain. I am your host, Yvonne Mason, and I am so excited I can't stand myself. That was an ad by my friend Chris Dunham. He's also my ad man, and yes, it was shameless promotion, but that's what part of this show is about. The other part of this show, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact that because of my guest and because they keep coming back, I don't know if it's because they like me or they just want me to shut up or what, but they not only come back, they bring new people with them, and it excites me to the point that I can hardly stand it. It almost makes me at a loss for words, and I know for y'all that have followed me for these many months, you're going, yeah, right, Yvonne, tell us another story, because we are so over 20,000 listeners and growing every day. Just on this show alone this morning, we're at 7,914 listeners just this morning, and I cannot tell you the excitement that I have and the honor and the humbleness that you as my listening audience bring to this show, because without y'all, there'd be no show, and without my guest, which makes this show happen, all of the honor, all of the gratification, and all of the success goes to them, because they are the ones that keep y'all coming back. And I am so appreciative to each and every one. We are now heard in over 64 countries, picked up a few new countries this morning, and I am just so grateful that all of y'all continually visit us and spread the word and tell others and make the show successful. This show will be a year old on July the 27th, and I never dreamed in my wildest dreams that we would be this far even before the show is a year old, and I am so grateful to each and every one of y'all. That being said, I have an author who's never been on my show before, and I am very honored to have her. This woman is absolutely amazing. I cannot wait to start talking to her, because she is not only a woman after my own heart, but she is an author after my own heart, and we'll get into that in a little bit. I can't explain it. I'll just have to describe her to you. Author-Betty-Webb. She is the author of 15 books, including the nationally best-selling Lena Jones series, Desert Vengeance, Desert Rage, etc., the humorous Gunn Zoo mystery series, which is the Puffin of Death, the Koala of Death, etc., and the family history, The Webbs of Alabama, Survivors of Change. Before beginning to write full-time, Betty worked as a journalist, interviewing everyone from U.S. presidents and astronauts who walked on the moon, Nobel Prize-winners, and polygamy runaways. She has taught creative writing classes at ASU, Phoenix College, and has been a nationally syndicated book critic for 30 years, ladies and gentlemen. In addition to other organizations, Betty is a member of the National Federation of Press Women, Mystery Writers of America, and the Writers Guild. She has also served as a writer-in-residence for the Arizona State Library. This is going to be a fun-filled hour which will fly by. Betty, welcome to the show. Thank you so much.
Well, listen, I'm really glad to be here. I really am.
I was reading your biography and your history, and I'm going, I want to be like her when I grow up.
Yeah. Listen, I look back at all the things I've done, and I can't figure out how it all happened. At the time, it seemed perfectly normal to do it, but like I say, I look back. I'm now retired from the newspaper, and I'm looking back. We watch the news here, me and my husband, and he'll say, somebody will be on the news saying something outrageous, and he'll say to me, Betty, did you ever interview him? And I said, oh, yeah, 3 times. And So it's just a very strange life. But while I was living it, I was not aware of how strange it was.
Well, to you it was probably normal because you did it every day without thinking of the enormity of the persona of the person you were interviewing.
Yeah.
But before we get into some of those people, let's go all the way back to even further. Was journalism something that you wanted to do as a child? Was it something you fell into? How did you get here?
Well, see, that's the weird thing. As a child, I wanted to be an artist. And when I got out of high school, I went to art school. And I was a graphic designer in New York and L.A. for about 20 years. But what happened, and I guess this is why I didn't notice at the time how weird my life was getting, I moved out to Arizona because I was really tired of the pace in New York. It was driving me crazier than I already was. And so I moved out here and met a guy who was the president of a singles club, and I was a single mom at the time. And I joined that singles club, and during the conversation we had one day, he realized how much I knew about the arts. Because when you live in New York City, you know, you go to the opera, you go to the ballet, you go to the theater, and of course, being an artist, I was always at the museums and the art openings. And so he said, you know, my newspaper would kind of like to find a freelancer who could cover art shows. And I said, oh, hey, that sounds fun. I'll do that. So I did. I freelanced for the newspaper for, I guess 5 years, and I wound up working with so many authors. Now, I was still in advertising at the time, doing artwork. But what happened was I wound up working with so many of the editors, and people would call me to do more stories, that one day they lost their music critic and called me up and said, would you be interested in working full-time as our fine arts writer? And I said, you know, I'm kind of sick of advertising, so I think I'll say yes. And that started my crazy life. I would go from opera concerts to rap concerts to heavy metal concerts, and then I started writing about writers. And then I started writing about actors, and it just went on, and I wound up just interviewing so many people, and my life got stranger. And then one day, I remember I was talking to Ann Rule, you know, who wrote all those wonderful true crime books. And I said, have you ever thought about writing fiction? She says, no, I see this as a calling because I'm able to bring closure to victims of crime. And I thought, well, gee, that's funny because I love, you know, I can't read true crime myself because it's sad, but I like mysteries. And she said, well, maybe you should write one. You're already writing at the newspaper. And I thought, she's got a point. So I wrote 3 mysteries, and they were terrible. But then and they kept getting, rejected. But then one year, I wrote a book that did not get rejected. It was called Desert Noir, and that was the first Lena Jones mystery. And I began to realize, my gosh, this is really what I was meant to do. So for the next 5 years, I would get up at 4 in the morning. I would work on my books, write my books, and then at 8 o'clock, I'd get ready, and I'd go to the newspaper to interview people and write all day. So finally, I got to the point where after 5 years, and I'd written 5 books that way, you know, getting up at 4 in the morning, I thought, you know, this is kind of nuts. I think I'm just going to leave the newspaper and write full time. So that's what I've been doing now.
And tell us some of the people you've interviewed. Ann Rule, which presidents did you interview?
Richard Nixon, but oddly enough, that was for my high school newspaper.
Wow.
Which is a strange story. And then, let's see, Jimmy Carter. And I did interview, let's see. Well, no, that interview, that's right, that got changed. That's right. I got to interview Bill Clinton's saxophone teacher.
Okay.
That was funny. Yeah, I tried to get one with Clinton, but he was busy apparently writing a book, and which he did. So but the interview that stays with me the longest is when I interviewed Buzz Aldrin. He was the second man to walk on the moon, and
right.
the interview happened over lunch, and he was telling me all his stories, and I was just so amazed, and he was such a hero of mine. In the middle of lunch, I leaned over and gave him a kiss on the cheek, and I said, "I love you," and he looked pleased.
I'm sure he
If I were him, I'd have looked scared. Yeah, if I were him, I would have looked scared. But we got a stalker here. But he liked it. He liked the adulation as well. He should. And the other
I think
time
he understood why you were saying because can you imagine going into outer space, especially with the technology we had then, going into outer space, walking on the moon.
On the moon, I get the chills thinking about it. And the other time a kiss came into play during an interview, I was interviewing Patrick Swayze.
Ooh.
And listen, you think
Feel
he's good
heart.
looking in the movies? You should have seen him in person. Oh my goodness, that man was a Greek god. But anyway, so in the middle of the interview, he leaned forward and kissed me on the cheek. Now, the only bad thing about that was that his wife was standing right there. Or you would never have seen me again.
You would have been gone. We would not be
I'd have been so gone. We'd have run off to Mexico.
And not only was he an amazing-looking human being, but his acting skills were just beyond anything I've ever seen. The man could take any role, and I saw him in several roles. He could take any role and own it.
Yes, he was a wonderful actor. A lot of good actors, and a lot of actors that are very, very good looking coast on that. But he did not. I mean, he was fit. He could dance. He had a wonderful body besides that beautiful face. And he just acted the hell out of every role.
He did. And you believe that he was that person. And this brings to mind the remake of Dirty Dancing. The feedback I'm getting on the remake is, why did they do that? Because they took a classic and ruined it. There was nobody like Patrick Swayze in that role.
Yeah. I watched it for about 3 minutes, and that was the end of me. It was just, I'm sorry. Some things are. Why remake a classic? I just don't understand that.
You know why? Because the writers in Hollywood, and I asked this of another friend of mine who's out in that area, and I said, why do they do this? With all of the indie authors that are out there, all of the indie actors that are out there, why are we going back and reinventing the wheel? Why do they not go after some of these indie authors and get their books and do movies based on the books? He said, Yvonne, because the money people want a surety. Well, guess what? You're not going to get a surety when you try to reinvent a classic. Come on. That would be like somebody taking Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind and said, we're going to remake it. I wish you hadn't even said that, because you might have planted the idea in some Hollywood producer's head. And I'm boy. Well, Can you
they did write a follow-up. They did write a follow-up to Gone with the Wind. I think they called it Scarlet
horrible.
or something.
Scarlet and Red. Horrible.
Yeah.
Now,
so anyway, that's the story of how I became, I got so used to interviewing people, and it was easy for me to kind of slide back and forth. For instance, in one day, I interviewed the New Zealand soprano Kiri Te Kawana, and later on that day, I interviewed Soundgarden singer Chris Cornell, who died recently.
Right.
And that was like my average day. I would swing forth from one genre to another. And I think that kind of influenced me when I began writing mysteries, because after I had written 5 Lena Jones mysteries, which they're very dark. I decided I wanted to see a little humor too, but I didn't want to touch the Lena Jones mysteries because they needed to be dark, because they always dealt with sort of topical subjects. So I decided, though, that I wanted to write something funny, and that's when I started writing the Gunn Zoo mysteries, because at that point, once I had such a busy life that once I quit the newspapers, I had all this block of time, and I didn't know what to do with it. So I decided to volunteer at the Phoenix Zoo. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona, which is right down the road from the zoo. And after I'd been up at the zoo for a couple of years, I thought, this is such great material with these animals, and then there was these crazy people. I've got to write about this. So I wrote the Anteater of Death. No animals are ever harmed in these books, ever. And let's see, and then I followed that up with the Koala of Death, and then we had, the Llama of Death. And then I took a vacation to Iceland, met a bunch of puffins, and came back and wrote the Puffin of Death. And in the meantime,
and I don't mean to interrupt, but I read an excerpt on the Puffin of Death, and I thought I was going to fall out of my chair.
Yeah, I know. Those books are really funny, but they're still kind of realistic. As you know, the Lena Jones books, I mentioned before that they're very topical. I cover such subjects as child abuse, polygamy, female genital mutilation, taking the law into your own hands, the death penalty, and those are serious. And at first I was kind of afraid when I started with the Gunn Zoo series that they would just be light fluff. But then I realized, well, wait a minute, this is my chance to educate people about exotic animals and how they are suffering because their environmental habitat is being reduced because of human incursion. And so I was able to get a lot of that stuff into those books. And so I'm very happy when my readers write me and say, well, I was not aware that thus and such was going on in Brazil, and this was going on here, and that it was impacting all these animals. So, I still feel good, even though those are, in a way, light and fluffy, but in another way they do pack a message.
Well, and I say this with just about every time we do the show, it doesn't matter if the book is fiction or nonfiction. If we read with an open mind and the author has done their homework, we are bound to learn something.
Yes. And if nothing else, you're in a really well-written book, you will learn something about the human condition and the human heart and the human capability of being both almost saintly and quite evil.
And we are light and dark as humans, and sometimes we don't know that the person we live with is purely evil, or the next door neighbor is purely evil, or even a minister.
Look at Anne Rule. She worked right next to a serial killer for, I think it was almost a year, and did not realize it.
Exactly. And the one down here that I wrote about, he was hired as a Martin County detective. They didn't know he'd been killing since 1966.
Oh, yeah. And that's, as a detective, see, they have a lot of power. And people, I've got police officers in my family, and we look to them for protection, so they show up and we think everything is fine. Hey, it's safe now, the police are here. But you get a rogue every now and then, And some of these men are able to hide their deviancy and can pass those psychological tests that they have to take to become a policeman. And
that's
boy,
true.
that's when terrible things happen.
And the sad part is now you don't know who to trust.
I know. It's and we live in a very untrusting world, and unfortunately, with good reason. So
that's true.
That again is why I like both writing books and reading books, because they show me the full range of human behavior, not just the behavior I myself meet every day.
What made you decide to write the Lena Jones series? Was it because of what you had experienced in your interviews, like the polygamy runaways? That had to have been hard to have written, to interview
it was
these
hard.
girls.
Yeah. See, here in Arizona, it's an odd thing. People knew, well, when I first came out here from Arizona, we'll take me as an example. When I first came out here from New York City to Arizona, I heard about, they had these polygamy compounds up there in northern Arizona, and I saw the pictures of the girls in the long dresses, and I thought, oh, how interesting. That's just another religion. It's a cultural different from mine. And that's how everybody else was just kind of waving it away, like this cute little thing that's up there in the northern part of the state. But I took a trip up there one time, and I didn't like what I saw. And then I was still at the newspaper, and I started doing some research. I found a woman who had escaped from there. She'd been forcibly married when she was 16 to her first cousin. Interfamily marriage is very popular up there. Brother marries sister, father marries daughter, uncle marries niece. Very common. But this gal that I met had been forced to marry her first cousin, and she had children, and then she ran away because punishment up there is beating. It's as simple as that. The men beat their wives. And the wives beat the children, and it's a rough life in more ways than one. And she started helping girls leave the compounds. And the odd thing was the state was charging her with kidnapping when she would help beaten 15-year-olds who were being married against their will to their uncles to become like the 19th wife of these brutes. She was helping them escape, and the state was going to prosecute her for kidnapping. I mean, it was just crazy. So that's when I wrote Desert. Now, see, Desert Noir, I wrote mainly about the art scene here in Scottsdale, Arizona, which is a heavy art scene. But I also got into what's happening to the desert, because we're Phoenix, Arizona is starting to look like L.A. I mean, it's a bunch of cities in search of a downtown. But with my experience of that book and doing the research for that book, I realized I was able to tackle in fiction the problem of polygamy, because none of the newspapers wanted the stories. And I wanted to write the stories for the newspapers, but they did not want it. They didn't want me to do it. They didn't want anybody to do it. And here's the interesting thing. Do you know what the reason was? They were afraid they would lose. They were afraid they would lose readership. Yep, because then they would be put in the position of being anti-religious. So as long as you can call something a religion, you can get by with just about anything. But that's starting to change now, because we can see how crazy religion can get. I'm not going to point any fingers, but we've seen some pretty wild, crazy, nasty stuff in the last few years.
Yes, we
have. Just about every phase of religious belief. I mean, few of us are innocent. But so, and that's with Desert Wives, Polygamy Can Be Murder. That's when I realized I had really found my calling, and so I started writing about all of these things that were happening here in Arizona, but I wrote them in such a way that they were also true for other areas of the country too.
You're an amazing woman, Betty. You are absolutely an amazing woman.
Yeah, but see, this is also, why it's kind of hard to explain my life because, I was raised on a farm, for Pete's sake. We were like 3 miles from the nearest town. And my job as a kid was to milk the goat and feed the chickens and collect the eggs. That's how I was raised. And then I became this thing. I became an artist, and I became a reporter, and next thing you know, I'm writing books. So it's very weird.
And the beautiful thing, Betty, is we have these women now screaming, feminism and women's rights and yada yada yada.
Yeah.
But look at you. You are the epitome of a successful woman who has done things that most women dream about. Yeah.
But something, my family, they're Southern, they're from Alabama. My family, to use a word that I don't always use, I will say they're just not odd. That would not be, they're eccentric. Let's put it that way. They're
Honey, I know exactly. I know what you're talking about because
yeah, you're from Georgia.
No, they're strange. Trust me.
Yeah, they are.
They're
well,
in some cases, some of them are weird, but they have a mindset, and you can't get out of that mindset, especially the older generation that my family's all died out. But women were supposed to be barefoot and pregnant, and, of course, my mother didn't raise me with that attitude. Some of them just didn't understand what I was doing or why I was doing it, because I was, even as a child, I was doing my own thing, and they didn't like it. But I understand what you're saying.
And it's true. And see, here's the flip side of that, which is so funny. Yes, they have this, stay in the kitchen and make the cornbread, honey. They've got that side. But at the same time, they've got the flip side where there you are, you're out in the middle of the pasture, and what are you doing? You're drawing the cows. So they pass by and they say, oh, that's Betty. She's just weird. She's always been weird. And so you start doing all this stuff, and they never say, don't do that. They just say, she's weird.
Yes, just her.
So in an odd way, it was a great freedom. And and that continues to this day. They say, that Betty, she's weird. But we love her.
I love it. You are a woman after my own heart in more ways than one, because before the show, we were talking about women authors and some men authors who completely destroy a woman character because every other page is she cried.
That's right. That is the lazy author's way of showing emotion. They haven't figured out how to write emotion and the complexity of human motion, so they have her cry when she's happy. She cries when she's sad. She cries when she got a boo-boo. She cries when she's scared. She cries when she feels guilty. It's just sloppy, amateurish writing. Writers need to go deeper than that. They need to go deeper than that. You have to work on your craft. And when you have characters showing emotion in the same way every time, there's a problem.
That is, and I loved what you said in your blog. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to read this right quick.
Okay.
She got a paper from a student. And this was Betty's blog. She says, why, for God's sake, in an age where women have been cleared for combat and are coming home from Iraq and Afghanistan minus arms and or legs, why this continuing insistence on weepy female characters? When one of my students recently turned in a suspense novel where the female protagonist fainted twice, oh, that's another one of my favorites, and cried 8 times, I took her to task for creating such a stereotypical character. And the student answered, but everybody knows women cry a lot. Really? What an insult.
Really? In my family, if you cried, and this was true of the girls as well as the boys, somebody would say, you keep that up and I'll give you something to cry about.
Yes, ma'am.
Crying was not considered sweet in my family.
No, it was considered
you were supposed to be tough. That's right. It was looked upon as weakness. And if you really felt bad and you really, really had to let it go, you went and you hid yourself out behind a barn. And maybe you dropped a tear or two, but after a while you just plain learned not to cry and to get on with life. Now, what annoys me so much about writers who write female characters who cry all the time is what they're really doing is they are basing their characters on Victorian heroines. And that's just crazy. The Victorian era has been dead for many, many years now, and there are no Victorian readers left to read those kinds of books. So we need to bring our female characters up to modern and contemporary standards. We've got to show a woman's courage, and you don't show that by having her blubber all the time.
No, because what's the point in having her? She's totally useless. Just shoot her and put her out of our misery.
I know. See, that's exactly the way I feel about it. But it's really interesting to hear both students and some writers defend their weepy heroines. But, you know, I just can't. I teach writing, and one of the first things I do is talk about three-dimensional characters. And you cannot have, again, to repeat myself, you cannot have a character handle every single emotion in the same way. That's very flat, one-dimensional writing. But yet that tears seems to be the default of weak writers. And I know I'm going to get a lot of emails over that, but I don't care.
Well, I don't either, because, see, I won't read about weepy females. I want to put my hand through the book, reach through and throttle them, because you and I both grew up in the South, and I can remember as a child, anytime somebody died, the adults would look at me and say, Vaughn, you were the strong one. You have to take care of everybody else. So when is it my turn? Well, never. So you learn that.
That's right.
You're stronger than you think. So if my female character, and I'm reading about her, and she's a cop, and she's standing in front of this guy, and it happens on these television shows, should I shoot him or not? Put the gun down. You kill him once, and then you blow him away. Don't be talking about, well, should I shoot him? How am I going to feel tomorrow? Who the hell cares? Just get rid of him.
I know. Or maybe instead of shooting him, I'll just cry.
Yeah. Or I'll talk him down. Really? You're going to talk down a murderer? I don't think so. My degree is in criminal justice. My husband was a cop. You don't talk down stupidity.
I know. But that's the writing world we live in, unfortunately. But I think I'm seeing a change because we are seeing more and more female heroines who are tough. But the interesting thing is, sometimes, not often, because my readers like Lena a lot, but every now and then I'll get a review saying Lena Jones is too cold. Well, no, Lena is not cold. She just doesn't cry. But she has all of the emotions. She just handles them like a grown-up.
And therein lies the rub. Crying,
there lies the rub.
Crying makes people tired. Crying,
yes, it does.
Also, when you're crying, you cannot be rational and logical because you're too busy falling down that pity party pit.
That's right.
So where's your hero going to go when she's sitting there blubbering her eyes out and Armageddon's coming?
I know. And I just hope some of those writers that do that are listening to this program. I really do. Because then it would make my life as a reviewer much easier.
Well, what happens, Betty, and you and I both read a lot, and you as a critic can probably relate to this. By the time you've read 5 books that have the same plot line with the same female character doing the same thing, you want to throw up.
I know. See, one of the other things that I tell my writing students is that if you want to write in any particular genre, say mysteries or suspense, you need to be reading the best of that genre, such as the Edgar winners for the mysteries and the suspense. And you not just books that were written 30 years ago. Don't go back to the Agatha Christies. Read contemporary work by writers who are still alive and still writing and winning the big prizes. You need to read them so that you know what is out there and what's been written, so that you don't turn around and write a book that's been written 200 times.
True. That is very true. Because sometimes not only do they make the female character cry throughout the book, but they regurgitate what they've already read. And
I know
readers are more educated now than ever before.
Yeah,
and they expect more.
Yeah, it's because one of the reasons is it's so easy for us to get books now. We can go to the bookstore and get them, and I'm a great believer in going to your neighborhood, especially the independent bookstores. But then they can download books. I mean, my goodness. I was teaching at a library that was 30 miles away, for instance, a while back, and so I was doing the books on CD in my car. And, in fact, you'll love this story. I was able, as long as I was working at that library and teaching, I was the writer in residence for the state of Arizona. For the first time in my life, I was able to get through Moby Dick.
I appreciate that.
It was 19 discs, but by gosh, I got through it. And I had tried 3 times earlier in my life to read Moby Dick, but I just couldn't get through it. But by gosh, because I was working 30 miles away and the traffic was terrible, I was able to get through Moby Dick in the car.
Well, and that brings me to another point, which is one of my pet peeves, is it doesn't take 6 chapters to describe a blade of grass.
Yeah, well, let's see. Let us talk about Moby Dick. You know that book is like about 900 pages, something terrible, and that white whale does not enter until I think it's the second to last chapter.
That's true.
It's brilliant. The book is brilliant, but oh gee whiz, if it were written today, it would not be published, because mystery writers such as myself know that you kind of have to keep your reader awake after the first chapter.
At least through the 3rd chapter. I mean, come on.
Yeah. I always try, because of my sympathy for the people having trouble with Moby Dick crowd, I always try to kill somebody in the first chapter. And then I kill somebody else later on.
But then you have the people that complain, well, you killed him in the 1st chapter, you killed him in the 3rd chapter. Well, it's a whodunit. You got to have a dead body before you have a whodunit.
And see, here's the thing. Here, in a way, the thing with mystery writers is that we seem to have, and I'm guilty of this, we seem to have the philosophy, if one corpse is good, then 3 corpses has got to be better. It's addictive.
You start counting the bodies after a time.
I know. And I generally have somebody try to kill my detective, too.
Well,
so there's a lot of blood in my books. Even in these zoo books. In fact, Well, I'm only going to give away this one plot point. Right now, I am writing a book called The Otter of Death. And again, no animals are ever harmed, but the animal that's mentioned in the title always has a big showpiece in the book. So in this book, the writer, The Otter of Death, my zookeeper heroine, whose name is Teddy, it's a girl, Theodora, she's a zookeeper, gets shot. And considering the fact that this is like a near cozy, well, actually it is a cozy, that's unusual, but it fit. Oh, and guess what? When she gets shot, she doesn't cry.
Oh, come on, Betty. She's got to cry.
No, she does not. She just goes, ow! No crying. There's no crying in baseball.
You're going to have women go, why isn't she crying? Didn't it hurt? Well, yeah, but your body goes into shock. I mean, after all, she's a zookeeper.
Yeah. That's right. Well, but women writers should think about this. Everybody knows that one of the most painful things ever is childbirth.
Yep.
Well, I've had 2 children. Guess who did not cry? And you want to know something? I've been with other women who've had children. They didn't cry either. So where's all this blubbering coming from?
Well, somebody hurt my feelings, so I've got to cry.
Yeah.
No, that's grounds for murder.
Yeah, it's just not that common. In fact, it's very rare. So when you have a character in a book that's supposed to be a contemporary novel about a contemporary woman, and then she cries all the time, that adds to the feeling of unreality. And one of the most important tasks of a writer is to create characters who are so real you feel like you know them. So if you start
feel like you're
off
in the story. Yeah.
That's right. So if you start off and you have her behaving, your character behaving in very unrealistic ways, you're kind of losing the game there.
And just as an aside, and you will appreciate this, women in the South don't sweat, they glisten.
That is true. We glisten and we glow.
Yes. and women are going,
we
what
glow.
the hell are these 2 women? Now, what we do as women writers from the South, what we do add to our books, and unless one is from the South, one does not understand if it is an insult or a compliment, is we say, bless your heart.
Oh, yeah. Hey, listen, and you really need to run when a woman says that to you. Bless your heart, because it's not good. It is not good.
And if she's already saying, oh, hell no, well,
yeah.
oh my goodness, on his way.
We try to be polite, and that's why we say, well, bless your heart, when we're really thinking, you are out of your mind.
Uh-huh. And wait till I get through shredding you.
Yeah, right. I get some of that in my books too, in the Gunn Zoo books, because even though the zoo that I write about, I pretend it's in Arizona, I actually have given my zookeeper sleuth, I've given her a very southern temperament. She's a southern girl, even though she doesn't know it.
I have to read your zoo books because, like I said, when I read the excerpt about the Puffins, ladies and gentlemen, I could see the character in the position that he was in. Now, he was in some puffin poop, but not by his own choosing. No, it was just one of these tragic, sad accidents. And that's one of the reasons I so enjoy writing those Gunn Zoo books, is because I'm able to get back my childhood on the farm. And anybody who's ever been raised on a farm knows that there's an awful lot of animal poop around. Absolutely. Well, we used to call it money because you sell that stuff and make money from it.
Right.
I always said it smelled like money to me.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And people go, what are you talking about?
Yeah. So it's well I'm reliving my childhood in a way when I write those books, but then when I come around and I write the Lena Jones books, that's the grown-up part that's writing those books. It's the gal who lived in New York and lived in Los Angeles and lived a pretty tough life in the business I was in. So advertising is not the most gentle business in the world. And when I was in New York, I actually worked on Madison Avenue. So you have to be tough and you have to be hard. And that's the persona I draw on when I write the Lena Jones books, even though she has nothing to do with advertising. But she has to be strong and she has to be hard. She was raised in foster homes and doesn't even know who her parents are. So just for her to survive, she's had to be very, very, I don't want to say withdrawn, but emotionally contained. Let's put it that way. She's very emotionally contained. Yeah,
I like
that.
Because she can't afford to be emotional on many levels.
No.
Number one, because if she is, then we're back to the weepy female. But she's learned to be hard in order to survive.
Yes. But just because you're hard doesn't mean you're heartless. Now, Lena is actually a very compassionate woman, but she knows better than to show it. And she will use her compassion, but she knows better than to let people know it's there.
Because they will use it against her.
Oh yeah. And that's true of anyone who is in law enforcement. They can be some of the most compassionate, nice people in the world, but they cannot go out there and act like this sweet, lovable creature, or they would just be eaten alive by the toughs on the street. You cannot do that. And that's just a hard lesson that some people have to learn in life. Maybe you are a gentle person. Maybe you go home and you pick up your cat, you pick up your dog, you pick up your baby, and all the love and all the tenderness comes out then. But it can't when you're out there on the street and you're doing your job.
Because you get yourself killed.
That's right. You will get yourself killed. But
now, let me ask
yeah, go ahead.
No, finish your sentence, because I was going to ask you, what are you working on next? Because I want to bring you back.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've got, like I said, I have a couple of people in my family. Well, one's gone now; he's dead. That were police officers, and they would come home and tell me these stories, and it would just break your heart. And yet, when they're out there on the street, they're acting like nothing bothers them. They come home, and sometimes they just fall apart.
Yep. My husband was the same way.
Yeah.
So what are you working on now?
Right now I am working on the Otter of Death. And there's something known as an otter count that they do on the Pacific coast. And that's to make sure that, because the otters here in America, the sea otters were almost extinct in the last century because so many had been killed for their pelts. So we're trying to bring them back in the wild. And so certain organizations on the West Coast, generally around Monterey Bay and the Monterey Aquarium, conduct an otter count to see if there is a fluctuation, if we've got more otters this year or less otters. If we have fewer otters, well, then what's wrong? What's killing the otters, or what's keeping the otters from breeding? So this particular, the Otter of Death, is about the death of a man, the murder of a man who was involved in the otter count. And at the beginning, he's looked upon as this really nice guy who was just helping take care of the otters. And then as the book goes on, nope, that's not exactly what happened. So my zookeeper sleuth, who by the way lives on a houseboat in Monterey Bay, she decides to figure out what's the real truth about this man who was murdered. And the book goes into some pretty interesting directions, and it's going to be a little different than some of the others. Well, each zoo book is different. None of them are the same. So, like I say, in the Puffin of Death, I went to Iceland, spent a couple of weeks there, so that was different. But this is different. This is the first book I've written about a sea mammal.
When is this one due out?
Pardon?
When is this one going to be released?
I'm not finished yet, so I don't know. It'll probably be next spring, is my guess.
Well, I have to bring you back because you're just so fascinating to talk to, and we've had such fun that I know my listening audience are going to be screaming, Yvonne, bring Betty back, bring Betty back. So you have to come back and visit with us and become a regular on the show.
Hey, listen, like all Southerners, I love to talk.
Absolutely. And we can give more writing tips to these young writers out here that have a hankering to put pen to paper and bring them up right so that their female characters don't cry and their male characters have character. They're not weepy too, which is another topic. Yeah. Telling you what. So, believe it or not, we're going to be out of time soon.
Yeah. Well, do you have any final questions for me then? Well, yes. Where can you be found, for one thing? Okay. All right. Let me give you my web address. It's www.betty-webb-mystery. Oops, wait a minute. I'm not even sure that's right. It's been so. I should be looking at my web page more often. Let's see what it is. It's www.betty-webb. It's 2 B's on web, by the way. -mystery.com. So you can always find me there. I'll repeat it again. www.betty-webb, 2 B's, -mystery.com. And on that first opening page on the right-hand side, upper right-hand side, it says where I'm going to be teaching, where I'm going to be signing books, and you just click on that link and you can kind of follow me around town. I wish you would come south to Florida because I'd certainly take a class from you, even though I've been writing for about 60 years. I would take another class from you just because I love hearing you talk. Yeah, well, you know, in Florida, that's where one of my cousins, he's a retired police chief, lives. I can't remember the name of the town, but he's down there living the life of Riley after a hard life. Is it on the East Coast or the West Coast? I think it's on the East Coast, but I'm not sure. Is he Geography south of Daytona? Is not one of my gifts. Is he south of Daytona? Don't know. Don't know. I've never been to Florida. Oh, you should. It's funny. I've been to Iceland, and I've been to so many other places, and I've never been to Florida. Well, folks can also find you on Facebook, right, Miss Betty? Oh yeah, I'm on Facebook, Betty Webb Writer, and I'm always there. She's amazing. I'm always there. Opining is one of the hosts always says. So you can go on and opine with me. Absolutely, because you will learn more from her in 5 minutes than you would learn from somebody else in 6 weeks worth of writing classes. Just by listening to her and going and reading her blog, just like the Weepy Female, you will learn so much if you just pay attention to what Betty is saying, because this woman's been around the block. She's done many, many things. She's written for newspapers. She's interviewed people. I mean, you've got more courage than me would go to a heavy metal rock concert, I'm going to tell you. They're good. They're good. And oddly enough, some of those heavy metal musicians are some of the most articulate, educated people you will ever meet. They just try to disguise it.
You were right.
Huh? Yeah.
You were absolutely right.
Yeah, Chris Cornell, sadly. Brilliant man. Very sweet person to talk to.
So see, ladies and gentlemen, you can learn so much from this woman. She is a wealth of information. Tap into it. If you live out in her area, go to her writing classes. If you want to write and write well, hook up with Betty and get into her writing classes, because she can teach you so much. And yes, I'm going to bring her back, because then we're going to talk about the male characters that female writers want to castrate with words.
Yeah.
So that will be our next topic, ladies and gentlemen. We will be discussing how female writers castrate male characters instead of giving them the depth that they need as a strong male character. Would that be a true statement?
Right. Oh, yeah, that is so true. We're not doing those characters any good when we try to make them sappy, sweet, or too rough.
Exactly.
We've got to make them human.
And they're three-dimensional. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you live in Miss Betty's area, hook up with her. And if you have an inkling to write, go and take some of her classes. And if she reads one of your books and you are an author and she gives you a less than a glowing report, don't take it personally. Take it to heart and rewrite your book in such a way that it grabs the reader, not so that it is flat, because that is so. I've read so many flat books here lately. I've almost quit reading because I've read so many flat books. Yeah, it's like they're phoning them in.
Yeah, they're phoning them in.
Yep, there's no heart in them at all.
No.
So tomorrow night, ladies and gentlemen, at 8 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, we will have author Ellen Byron with us. She is also, this will be her first time with us. I'm really anxious to talk to her. And next week, we will only have a show on Wednesday night. Author Sherry Rensler will be with us, because she and I, on Thursday through Sunday, will be in Cocoa Beach at a 4-day book event with over 70 authors. If you're in the area, come join us. Yes, I can't wait. It's the first book event I've been to in 2 years, so I'm really excited about that.
Wow.
And, Miss Betty, don't hang up when the show goes dark, because I want to tell you some things. It'll be in archives, and it'll be heard on archives, but I want to tell you. And before we run out of time, I want to tell you how much I appreciate you, how much fun that I've had, and I cannot wait to bring you back, because this hour has been just over the top.
Oh, thank you.
Loved every minute of it. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you all have learned something about this wonderful author, both as a human being and as an artist, because this is what I try to bring to the listeners, is that we are humans. We have failings, we have strengths, but we love our craft, and that's why we do it. And talking about our craft, just like Buzz Aldrin, he was a dreamer, and when Miss Betty kissed him on the cheek, that meant that she validated his dream. And that's important, because without dreamers such as Betty and myself and the Buzz Aldrins of the world and the Richard Nixons and the Chris Connells of the world, we would have no music, no science, no written word, no leaders. So if your child, your spouse, your significant other, your mother, your brother, your sister, your aunt, your uncle, yourself, your friend, your cousin has a dream, please do not discount it. Please do not poo-poo it. Support them, because they are part of the tapestry. And as I always say at the end of every show, if you want to be special, don't just feel special. Be special. And stop asking for permission for success. Just go out and do it, because you don't have to ask permission. Also, your smile is your logo. Your personality is your business card. How you leave others feeling after having an experience with you, ladies and gentlemen, that becomes your trademark. And I choose to leave people with a good feeling about me, and I know Betty does because she has left me feeling so refreshed and so good. I'm ready to take on the world.
Mm-hmm.
So remember that, ladies and gentlemen, that how you leave others trademark. Tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, Ellen Bryan will be here. Don't forget that. This is Yvonne Mason with Off the Chain. We say good night. Okay, we have now gone into our archives, my friend, and what will happen is after I get off the phone with you and the show goes up into archives, I will put the link up on my Facebook and I will tag you in it. Take the show and promote it anywhere you want to.
I will.
And then, it gets better. Because tomorrow I will put it up on SoundCloud, Mixcloud, Spreaker, Podcast.com, and Podcast Garden. I will tag you in those links, and you take those links and put them everywhere, because this show is heard not only here, but it's heard on YouTube, TuneIn Radio, iTunes, Stitcher, FM.com, and a half a dozen other radio stations I've never even heard of all over the world.
Oh, okay, great. Well, yeah, you send me those links, and boy, I will put them up.
All right, my darling, and please, I want you to come back, because I have I've had so much fun, and what if we get you on after the first of the year?
That sounds good. That really does. Do you want my home number?
Either that or we can just stay hooked up on Facebook, whichever is more convenient for you.
Okay, Facebook is great. You're up on my Facebook.
Yes, ma'am, and I stay up with you too.
Okay, good.
And I can and David Morrell is a wonderful human being.
Man, he is. I have learned so much from David Morrell. I really have. He is such a kind gentleman. He's wonderful.
You know, I interviewed him on this show. And we had a blast. He said it was the most fun he's ever had on an interview.
Oh, that's great. Well, you are a great interviewer, and take it from someone who does it too. You know, that was my business for years, and you are darn good.
Thank you, my darling. You've made my week. I appreciate that so much. So I will let you go and finish your evening with your family, and I appreciate if I were in front of you, I would give you a kiss on the cheek.
Okay, great. Same here. Mwah.
Mwah. So I will talk to you, and I will add you to the January schedule, because by then you should be pretty close to Otter of Death, and maybe even starting on something else, and we'll just get a whole hour of good stuff going.
Okay, great. Well, then I'll talk to you then.
Okay, honey.
All right.
Good night.
Okay. Bye-bye.